All right, so now we're going to move over to another section, and this is the Game Master's Toolbox. And one of the secrets of being a good role-play game master is being able to keep a group together. And so today we're going to look at several methods to work to keep your groups on the same track, playing regularly, and maintaining even in the torrential, torrential? Maybe not the right word. It's not raining yet, so it is in Potiphar, but not here. The idea of these. What is I looking for? There was a word I was looking for. I just almost had it there on the tip of my tongue. Not even torturous. I don't even know what it was. These trying times, the idea of being able to hold a gaming group together on play on a regular basis seems to be in a time-honored and time-challenged issue. We always are having problems keeping groups together. And so let's talk about some ways we can do that. The first one, by far, set and try to keep to a schedule. Pardon me. In the world of role-playing games, the players tend to have very busy schedules. We are busy people nowadays, and so it's kind of hard. But if you dedicate to keeping a regular schedule, maybe it's only once a month. Maybe it's once every 2 weeks. In my case, maybe it's only once a day, the idea of being able to set and hold to a schedule is really important, because when you hold a schedule and maintain it and keep your session going week over week over week, it gives people a confidence and a kind of a feeling of obligation to be a part of it. If they miss a session, it's on them, and so therefore they do what they can to be a part of what you're doing. So by holding and setting and keeping a regular schedule, you give them reasons to want to maintain the continuity of it, and therefore it becomes part of their pattern, and they will actually move things around to make it happen. I've got some friends who have said they would move heaven and earth to be on Nykos, and so that obviously, as a game master, feels good, but the reality is that every games group wants to be able to maintain that continuity. In today's chaotic world, there we go, it's difficult to do so. So that's the first one. Next thing is make sure that in any case, when you have a group of players together, make sure you honor and respect each other. In the world today, it's so difficult to find people who are your tribe, that are part of your community. And I'm always, as you may know because of these videos, I'm doing everything I can to expand the boundaries of Nykos and bring more people in. So if you are interested in being part of our community, definitely you want to follow the link down below and join our Discord, so you can communicate with me both through the verbal channel, but also to perhaps become a member of one of our play groups. We have several. We have one that's associated with our Patreon account that gives you special insider information in that games group, because it's exclusive to those that are supporters, and other events and such that we do. But the idea of keeping the story respectful and maintaining the continuity with the players. In other words, giving each player their own portion of the story. Make sure everybody's got their equal share of the time, and that you honor what they have as their inputs. These are really important. The third one, and this has nothing to do actually with the game, it has to do with being a communicator. If you are gathering together on a regular basis, that's a great way to start communication, but it's far more important to maintain the communication outside of the game session. If you're looking at it from the standpoint of how much time a 4-hour session is compared to the hundreds of hours that we have in a week, I think it's 200, I don't even know the number, but the idea is that you want to be able to communicate on a regular basis. One of the reasons why we utilize the Discord is so that we have a way to keep tabs on what's going on. If there's a challenge coming up or a schedule, I mean, even if you're keeping a schedule, it's sometimes okay to adjust, but you have to make sure that you communicate with everyone. I'm a I used to be an air traffic controller. See there, that's my speech pattern messing me up. My upper lip is acting crazy today. If you communicate and you share information with the other players on a regular basis, then they know when there's going to be a change. And if there needs to be an adaptation on a single week basis, sure, go ahead and adjust and adapt. I try to juxtapose this with the keep and set a schedule because you don't want to become so adjustable that you no longer have a frame. So definitely try to hold to your schedule, but once in a while it's good. Additionally, quite frankly, gameplay is only a part of communication, right? When we are in a games group, we are connecting with other people and we are part of a community and we are more than just ourselves. And so by staying in communication, we definitely build on that community aspect. Now, next part. Because of the fact that we've got these large gaps of time between sessions, make sure you allow for time for kibitzing. And I know that might be cultural appropriation, but the idea here is that you should have the opportunity for players to engage with each other and share the joys and excitements and the downsides and the dangers of the game sessions that they're playing in. And to do that, you need to kind of give them the ability to kibitz. Man, today this is acting up. Give them time to talk about the game, to carry on conversations about what's going on, and to let them be playful with it. Sure, their memories are going to adjust, and sometimes they're going to remember things quite differently than the actual sessions, but that's okay. We're trying to build on our collective consciousness, if you will. Now, this next one may seem a little crazy and maybe a little bit kind of Jordan Peterson-ish, but keep your play area tidy and comfortable. You want people who come to your table to want to be there and to be a part of what you're doing. So therefore, have plenty of room for them to sit, places for them to put their stuff. Get your own belongings out of the way so that they can have their play space easy to use and enjoyable so that they want to come back. One of the biggest challenges, of course, is that we all have such busy schedules. Why would we do something that is difficult when we can do something that's easy, right? That's our biggest challenge in the world today, is that we've got way too much convenience, so we forget sometimes that we should have at least some portion of obligation to other people. Now the next one, this is for games for storytellers, and I'm looking at me when I'm saying that, if you know what I'm saying. I'm looking at you, yes, but I'm also looking at me, because the reality is that if we don't vary the type and intensity of our sessions. Hello and welcome. We are on the air right now. I'm dealing with Game Master's Toolbox. How are you doing today?
All right.
Ah, there he is. Welcome back, Abletop. So we're talking about secrets to keep a games group together, and I know this is a place that's near and dear to your heart, so you walked right in
Yes.
at the right time. So I'm sure you're going to have some responses to the things I've already said. But were you here? Did you hear the previous parts about setting a schedule and all of that, or did you just now jump on blind?
Just now jumped on blind
Okay,
because
so
I
that's
was.
okay. That's okay. I'm flexible. I bend at the elbows and the knees, at least. Um, what we're talking about is the ways to keep a games group together, and I know that's something that you have battled for decades. So, uh, the first thing you have to do is set a schedule, and this is in the pre-game period, in the pre-session 0 time frame. You need to make sure that you can talk with all the members and make sure that you've got a general idea of a schedule.
Yeah, that actually has been working for my current group.
Right.
We've been keeping to our schedule for the most part.
Good, good. So the main thing is to set the schedule and then recognize there'll be days and times when it doesn't happen. Like my Wednesday group, one of my private tables, we weren't able to hold this week. But on point 3, we'll come back to that in a second. But the idea is that you set the schedule and then you know that's when you're going to do it. And then if something happens and it has to adjust off, you'll still remember it for the following week. And
Yeah.
the main thing about keeping that schedule is try to keep it over a period of time so that the players get used to putting it onto their calendars. Because there's so many things that can fill our time nowadays that if you set it up as a well, we're going to try to play on Saturdays, but we might do it Sunday afternoon, or maybe we'll get an extra session in on Tuesday. When you start thinking that way, the players no longer see it as a regular thing. So try to always keep to your
Yeah,
schedule. If you have extra time and want to play extra sessions, that's fine, but never make it a replacement for your regular game. All right?
exactly.
Okay. Now, the next point is going to jump off of that one for a second, and I just want to talk about it because I know you've also run into this challenge, and that is you need to make sure your players all know that they need to honor and respect each member for their own abilities. In other words, don't expect player X to play the same way that player Y plays, or try to play the same psychological game that the others are, because each person is going to bring to the table their own talent and their own gifts. And so we want to make sure we recognize and honor that among each member so that you're not showing any favoritism. Because when you start to show that, when you start to show you like one person's response perhaps more commonly than another person's, then you're leaving yourself open for that person to simply stop coming, and they'll use whatever excuse they need to because they're really feeling dissatisfied. So make sure that you're honoring and
yeah,
respecting your players. I know, Scott, this is not a problem you would ever face because you're an angel. But I know that I have run into situations in my own games where I have driven people off by having to being put in a situation where it's player A or player B, and you can't have it both ways, and blah blah blah. So, and to avoid that, make sure you honor and respect each player, each member for their own specific gifts and skills.
yeah, that's important.
Um,
Once you recognize what those gifts and skills are in the
well,
beginning, it
that's really comes into this next one, and that is communication, right? You have to get to know the person as well as the character. If all you do is say we're going to be playing on Sundays and you got to be there at 2 o'clock, and I expect you to be in character, and we're running with the story at that moment, that person might need a few minutes of person time. They want to be maybe they got something going on where they need affirmation or they need somebody to offer some advice. You need to make sure that the communication is ongoing, even outside of game.
yeah, and that's like I feel like that's one of my weaker weaknesses personally because I've noticed I do not communicate well
Well,
online.
well, I can say that one thing that I do know, Scott, and this is not about you at all, but the need for communication as a storyteller is hypercritical because players will talk with each other outside of game and can start to create false understandings, or there may be even some bullying going on. There may be some uh, gaslighting or other things that could be going on in the background. And if you're not staying in communication on more than a session only, period, then you're setting yourself up for the group to fail because even if it doesn't have anything to do with you, if you're not able to check out what's going on with everybody in the group and everybody staying, friends with each other, you can have people all of a sudden they don't show up and you don't know why. And maybe nobody knows because nobody checked on that person. We have you remember, I'm sure you remember talking about, I can't even see. I'm now falling out of it because and my brain just froze on me. Badger, one of the guys that we talked with a lot behind the scenes. He's got medical problems, but when he got into issues where he had to go to the hospital, none of us had any communication with him at all for 3 months. You
Yeah,
know, and when he doesn't show up at a game session and you don't hear from him, many of us unfortunately go to the out of sight, out of mind, right? Now, in my case, I have to say that by using my at everyone in the Discord, I was able to get a message to him that he was able to respond to. But he's been in and out of a hospital for better than a month and had no way to get a hold of us because he
yeah,
didn't have anything but he didn't have the Discord because he was one of the guys that was in before we had the hack, and so therefore he didn't get picked back up. And so getting him back into the group this last week was the first time we've heard from him in 3 months. and that's not good, And the fact was, he was strong enough as a person who wanted to play to actually reach back across that line. But how many people that say they're going to come to your game and don't show 3 weeks later, you don't ever hear from them again because they're now on to their next thing and they're no longer communicating with you. So
Yeah, and
so by
that
having by
has happened.
setting up a purpose and a means to communicate with everyone on a regular basis really helps to fix that. Now the next one I think you're going to like, Scott, and this one I'm this happens in my groups every session. Make sure that you provide enough time for the players to kibitz. You've got to let the players chew on what's happened in the sessions and remember, when this thing happened or when they lit the dragon on fire or whatever, and let them talk about those wonderful moments. Now, you don't give them too much time because it takes away from the gameplay time, but you do want them to at least feel comfortable enough to talk about the game outside of the game because that's how you
Yeah.
build interest in it and therefore keep them playing, right? So now we're caught up. Wow, my English is so good today. We're now caught up with where I was, and that's it. Is the next one is to make sure that you ensure that the play space area is tidy. Now, you just were mentioning that you have difficulty sometimes in the online session, but don't you agree the tables are a lot clearer? That was a joke. If you're playing online, there's
Wow.
no table that can get messed up, right? But the idea is that you want to make sure that when you have people, especially like you do in live games, you want to make sure that each person has enough room for their goods. They have to be able to get to their dice, and the dice rolling tables have to be big enough and all of that. Because if you make it so that it's uncomfortable, they may simply avoid coming and giving you every kind of excuse not to be there because they didn't feel they were welcome or they didn't feel uh, safe or they didn't feel comfortable in the space that you gave them. So I know that sounds a little, why is my brain freezing today on names? Um, Maybe a
No.
little bossy to tell people to clean up their areas or whatever. But I am reminded of when I was married folk. Of course, if I wanted to have my friends over to play, I had to make sure the house was clean. Now that was, in a default condition, the house usually is. But if you're going to have if you have a game where you're going to be rolling dice, then you need to make sure there's a place for them to roll dice, a place for
Yeah.
them that feels comfortable to them. Does that make sense?
Yes, totally. Because, I mean, that's just kind of common sense. But maybe I've just been doing this for years, and what I feel is common sense when it comes to this may not be common sense to everybody.
Well, also when you're playing at a game store, it's a little different because that's always going to be a clean space, right? You're not going to have anything to do with that. But this is just in reference of when you're playing at home games and things like that.
Yeah, which I do a home game once a month, and I always make sure that we have everybody has enough room. We
Mm-hmm.
don't get too messy with that.
That's fair.
Little crowded,
Yep.
but
Yep. Yep. Well, it's hard to have big groups in a small house, and although you have a nice expansive house, it's sometimes still hard to keep people communicating when you've got groups that are moving to another part of the house and whatever during the game. So you just have to make sure that everything feels comfortable enough that your players will re-engage, over time.
yeah,
The next one, and this again, I'm pretty sure it doesn't apply to you, but you have to make sure you vary the type and intensity of your sessions. I've got a friend who's very big into the historicity of the adventure world, and he wants to make sure everybody holds to um, the world as it is and is very serious in their sessions. Well, you can only do that for so long because players won't like the idea of sometimes having let's say it's always fights. If you're always doing combat because that's what everybody thinks they want, you do that 6 or 8 weeks in a row, you're going to have somebody go, come on, let's do something else. It's
yeah.
why can't we do a puzzle only game? Or maybe instead we have a pure, heaven forbid, role play game where we actually sit and have conversations with other people, you know?
Those are the worst for me as a DM, but anyway.
Well, they can be, but I like leaving it to the players, and so make it so a session where they have to talk to each other, so they don't. It's not you, it's them. It's the I've lore dumped on 4 weeks, and 2 of you weren't here 2 weeks ago, and 2 of you weren't here last week, and so all 6 of you now have to talk more about what happened. I sit back and let them talk, right?
Yeah. Then you get into a situation. Well, okay, this has happened to me. I will let them talk, and then they stop talking. It takes me a minute to realize, oh, they're waiting on me to tell them the
Right,
next.
right. So it's a matter of learning how to deal with it. That's true. And my point about the varying is that just have fun. Don't feel like you have an obligation to only be a lore dump factory. You know, if all you do is
Yeah,
pontificate and give them data, at some point there's no agency for them. So why would they be involved? Now the next one is one of my favorites, and I have to be careful with this because I love to employ cliffhangers. I'm sure Scott doesn't know anything about cliffhangers in my games. They never happen, do they? No, never. Now, the idea is that you want to use them judiciously because if you did it every
yeah.
week, if you do it every week, the player's going to feel like, well, we never accomplish anything. We're always stuck. So sometimes have a session where they actually conclude a puzzle. Wow! And let them celebrate. Yay! And when they get a bunch of cash, let them go buy stuff. Yay! And to me, that's the part that's the hardest. When they're running around spending fake money on fake stuff that they don't really need, just like, but players love that stuff. So make sure you do that. And I think the real key to keeping games group running week over week and month after month is you got to be having fun.
Yes,
I mean it very
that is.
seriously. When we get to the point where going to a game becomes a burden, it's no longer fun, and we won't make the effort. So you literally want to have them hungry for more every session when it's done. So cliffhangers help sometimes, but not all the time. You know, sometimes people just like to have sat around and kibitzed for most of the evening. I've had many game sessions where that ends up happening, where the idea was we're going to have this storyline and we're going to go from point A to point B and everything's going to go great, and the players decide, no, we're going to sit around the bar all day. Throw.
We, like, I've had a couple situations recently where one of the players in particular wants to talk to the leaders of the town, and having to come up with those characters on the spot because they're not clearly defined is
Right.
it's strenuous, but I make it work. It
Right.
honestly leads to some of the funniest points in the book in the story for us. At
Right.
least I think so.
Well, I just realized something too, Scott. We're both treating this like we're talking to an audience. We're really not. This is not how we talk to each other, usually.
No, no, it is not.
So we need to kind. I mean, we're having fun. Don't get me wrong, but we need. I need for us to actually have these conversations as you and me having the conversation, because somebody walking into the room feels like we're both yelling at other people. I don't mean to do it that way, and I don't mean to always ask you to affirm what I'm saying. So if there's something that you disagree with me on, or have your own ideas that I haven't mentioned, please include them as well. Okay? I don't want you to feel
Of
like,
course, of course.
well, I just didn't want it to feel like it's a talk show where I'm
Yeah.
leading the conversation and the charge, and I want you to, lockstep. Yes, I agree with you, Mr. Alvin. Yeah, this is really good. Yeah, no, I don't want that. You know that. So, alrighty. Having said that, um, what are some? Can you think of one or two ideas of what you would recommend for other people? Maybe in a positive light of something that you have done in the past that really helped to keep a group together, or the kinds of things maybe that you feel that you've run into that I haven't covered.
I don't know how to cover, like, I don't know whether you covered the walkout because I haven't. That happened to me once before.
A walkout? Tell us more. I don't know what you mean.
Well, okay, not my current campaign, but the campaign I did a campaign maybe 2 years ago, and it was 8 people. It ended up going down to two because one person left, and his 5 friends he brought with him left with him. So I ended up stopping the campaign because I didn't see the point in continuing it with 2 or 3 with this father and son. I loved them, like, I adored playing with them, but I could not continue that story with just them, even though there was a structure to do it with 2 players or whatever.
Well,
I just felt
okay. So
different.
this leads me to a couple of questions. Uh, as far as walkouts, now I know what you're talking about. I've actually had one. People talk about the game master and the TPK, and I've had at least one TPW, and that wasn't completely true. That was a player walkout on everybody but the one player that they had asked me to ask to leave. So that was actually on me, sort of. But the the question, uh, the larger sense of the question is, number one, you had somebody that was playing in your group that was so instrumental to the group that when he left, they all left. That to me doesn't sound healthy for your campaign. For that one player to be the one who drove the story for them enough that they felt like they didn't want to stick to find out what happened without him. So maybe you were looking at your group differently. You should have really considered to be a group of 3. You, the young man and his father, and this guy, and his followers or his friends. You see what I'm saying? They weren't there to play the game with you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I know that now.
Yeah,
Didn't
well,
at the time.
we all learned it the hard way, right? You can never learn any of this stuff the easy way. It has to be when you slam your head against a wall. So
And that has led me to a new symptom recently.
go ahead.
I find it very hard to both find people, and then when I do find people, I find myself wondering, can I trust said people?
Okay, so here's a phrase I want you to memorize, and this is true of everybody listening: benefit of the doubt. If you live your life worrying about what other people are thinking and what other people are doing, you are missing the point. You have to assume, you have to assume that the person that tells you he wants to play sincerely wants to play. And therefore, you treat him like somebody who's playing the game.
Yeah.
And it's only when you realize that he's not that you need to have another conversation. You can't let yourself be burdened with worrying about what other people's motives are, because their motives are their own, and their motives will change as much as everything else. Minute by minute, day by day, they're gonna choose their own path, so to speak. So, having said that, it is an interesting conundrum, but you really don't need to borrow from tomorrow the problems that there are there, because they haven't happened, right? They're, at this moment they're playing with you and you're enjoying it. So
Yeah.
accept their statements, play the game with them, and it's only when you start. I mean, if they're not there if they're being disingenuous, you're gonna feel it. You can go, dude, this isn't working. You're not engaging in the game. I don't know what you're doing, but this has not been fun for me. So it's a matter of you. When I say having fun, it actually means you as the storyteller too. You as the game master have to be having as much fun as well. Because if you're not, if it's work for you. Now, let me clarify. I am a professional game master. I have run games when I didn't feel like it. I have run games for groups that I didn't want to. So, because of money. So that's different. I was working in those instances. But generally
Yes.
speaking, if you're a game master and they're not putting money in your pocket, you better be having fun. My dad always said it this way. He said that in life, you either need to make a lot of money or have a lot of fun. and I've had jobs where I must have been really having fun because I didn't make a lot of money. So I guess the point here is that you need to really enjoy what you're doing, because if you're doing it for any other reason, then that reason takes over and you're no longer doing it. Even in the case where I'm a professional game master, there's been points where I got to the point where I was cookie cutter, chopping up the story and throwing it little, bits and pieces, and I wasn't doing my job. I wasn't being the game master I should have been for the money, because I let that issue get in the way. So don't do that. I'm telling you.
Okay, I feel like that is, from my experience, when you say cookie cutter, I feel like that happened to us last generation a little bit. You've since fixed that, but
well, I think there were so many other issues we could add into that mix. I don't really want to go there, but yeah,
yeah,
there was a lot that went into why it became cookie cutter, and one of them was it was COVID. We had been doing the games for 2 years nonstop every week, ritually and religiously, to the point where it was no longer any of us really having fun. But that's subject to the times. Now, I do want to get on to the next section of this because I want to show off. This is when we get to see my other camera layout. So let me switch to that. All right. So thank you for being with me during the toolbox. Now, if you're a viewer and you want more information about what we're talking about, make sure you put a comment in the comment section. We respond as quickly as we can. This is a conversational channel, and although in the past I've been somewhat more of a pontificate, I'm endeavoring to definitely be more interactive and communicative.